Nathan decided later that history probably hinged on the exact moment he tripped over a half-buried conduit and swore loudly inside his helmet. At the time, it felt less like destiny and more like a personal betrayal by gravity. The chamber beneath the ruins had been quiet for centuries, 6 of them as it would turn out, and it responded to his sudden intrusion with a low, almost offended hum, like an ancient machine clearing its throat after a very long nap. The sight itself made no sense, which was usually Nathan's first clue that it was important. Human ruins tended to crumble, leak, and occasionally collapse on interns. This place was intact. Smooth walls curved with a precision that mocked erosion. Symbols glowed faintly as his boots disturbed layers of dust that no one had touched since humanity was still arguing about whether the earth was round. Nathan activated his recorder out of habit, narrating softly, because archaeologists talked to themselves when no one else was around and pretended it was professionalism. At the center of the chamber stood a structure that looked less like a coffin and more like a promise. A transparent pod, suspended in a lattice of alien alloy, pulsed with a slow internal light. Inside lay a woman. She looked human at first glance, too human for comfort. Pale skin, dark hair fanned around her head, hands folded with deliberate elegance. Then Nathan's eyes adjusted, and he saw the ears. Long, gently tapered, unmistakably not human. He stared for a full 10 seconds, then exhaled. "Okay," he said aloud. "Either I've discovered the most significant find in recorded history, or I've finally cracked from grant paperwork stress." His scanner chirped, delighted to be relevant, and displayed readings that made no sense at all. The pod was active, not decaying, not preserving remains, maintaining life. Nathan did what any responsible scientist would do in this situation. He told himself not to touch anything. Then he touched everything very carefully. The console beside the pod responded to his proximity, symbols rearranging themselves like they'd been waiting for him specifically, which was unsettling for reasons he couldn't articulate yet. One interface helpfully translated itself into something resembling modern standard, as if the machine had been quietly updating its language libraries for centuries out of sheer optimism. "Of course you speak my language," Nathan muttered. "That tracks." A status indicator blinked, then stabilized. Stasis complete. A smaller line scrolled beneath it, polite to the point of menace. "Awake sequence available." Nathan laughed, short and nervous. No, thank you. I'm just here to look." The machine, unimpressed by his boundaries, emitted a soft chime. The chamber brightened. The pod's light intensified, and the hum deepened into something that vibrated in his bones. Nathan backed away, hands raised, as if the ancient technology might be persuaded by body language. "Listen," he said, addressing a device that had outlived entire civilizations. "If you're about to wake someone up, maybe don't do it because I tripped." The pod opened anyway. The transition was seamless. No dramatic hiss, no frost, no cinematic gasp. One moment she was enclosed. The next, the barrier dissolved like mist. The woman's eyes opened calmly, as if 600 years of sleep had been a light nap she'd taken between conversations. She sat up. Nathan forgot every prepared thought he'd ever had. She looked at him with unsettling focus, eyes sharp, ancient, and far too aware for someone who had just woken from centuries of nothingness. Then she spoke, her voice steady, accented in a way that felt deliberate rather than foreign. "My husband knew you'd come," she said. Nathan blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him with interest that felt personal. "You're earlier than he predicted," she added, as if that explained everything. Nathan gestured weakly around the chamber. "I don't suppose there's a version of this conversation where you tell me I'm not actually here?" She smiled then, faintly, like someone amused by a joke only she understood. "No," he swallowed. "Great. Just checking." She rose from the pod with controlled grace, steady on her feet despite the fact that she had technically skipped 6 centuries of leg day. Nathan noticed, absurdly, that she didn't look disoriented at all. No panic, no confusion. Just alert curiosity. "You're human," she said. "Last I checked," Nathan replied. "Archaeologist, Nathan. I usually shake hands, but I'm not sure what the protocol is for waking immortal alien women. Her expression softened, just a little. Lady Syveth, she said, and you were always meant to be here. Nathan laughed, because the alternative was screaming. That's funny, he said. People usually say that after I break something important. She glanced at the console, then back at him. You didn't break it, she said. You fulfilled it. Nathan looked at the ancient machinery, the glowing symbols, the pod that had waited patiently for a man who hadn't been born when it was sealed. His humor faltered, just slightly. Yeah, he said slowly. That's somehow worse. Nathan discovered that there were very few polite ways to tell an ancient, possibly immortal alien woman that she could not, under any circumstances, wander off alone into an unstable ruin while he tried to radio his supervisor without sounding insane. Just stay here, he said, palms out, backing toward his equipment. For 5 minutes, 10, a historically insignificant amount of time. Lady Syveth looked around the chamber with measured calm, as though she were reacquainting herself with furniture she had lent to a friend centuries ago. This place is no longer dangerous, she said. It hasn't been for a long while. Nathan glanced at the ceiling, where several massive stones were being held in place by technology he didn't understand and deeply mistrusted. That's what the ruins always say right before they collapse. She watched him with an expression that hovered somewhere between curiosity and amusement. You're afraid, she observed. Professionally, Nathan replied. It's part of the job. He keyed his comm, hesitated, then shut it off again, explaining that he'd awakened a 600-year-old alien noblewoman because he tripped over destiny felt like something best delayed. He turned back to her instead, because at least she was real and not going to ask for paperwork. You said your husband knew I'd come, Nathan said. I'm going to need you to explain that sentence very slowly. Syveth inclined her head. He saw you. That's still not better. She moved toward the console, fingers gliding over symbols that responded instantly to her touch, systems flaring to life like loyal pets. Nathan watched, half in awe and half in irritation, as the interface rearranged itself again, clearly preferring her presence. He had the gift of sight across probability, she said. Timelines, outcomes, intersections. Most people glimpse moments. He saw patterns. Nathan folded his arms. So he was a prophet. Syveth considered this. No, prophets announce certainty. My husband despised certainty. He believed it made people lazy. Nathan snorted despite himself. I like him already. She paused, studying Nathan's face, then nodded faintly. He described that reaction. Nathan's smile froze. Okay, that's officially unsettling. She gestured and the chamber lights adjusted. Softer now, less clinical. Before I slept, he showed me many possible futures. In some, humanity never left its planet. In others, it burned itself out before it could matter. In a few, it surprised him. That sounds like us, Nathan said. We're big on surprises, mostly bad ones. Syveth's lips curved slightly. He agreed. She led him toward the edge of the chamber, where a wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing the layers of rock above them. Nathan felt very small, standing beside someone who spoke of centuries like inconvenient afternoons. When I chose to sleep, she continued, it was because one future mattered more than the rest. A narrow thread where a disaster was avoided, not by power, but by perspective. Nathan frowned. Let me guess. That's where I come in. Yes. He pinched the bridge of his nose. I don't even like leadership roles in group projects. That too, he mentioned. Nathan dropped his hand. You're doing that on purpose. No, she said calmly. You're doing it on purpose. Humor, when confronted with the impossible. He said you would. Nathan exhaled, long and slow, and leaned against a console that hummed obligingly under his weight. So your husband predicted humanity, space travel, me specifically, and the exact moment I'd accidentally pressed the wrong button? The correct button, she corrected. Agree to disagree. She faced him fully now, her long ears catching the soft light, eyes intent but not unkind. He did not know your future in detail, she said, only that you would question him, that you would resist the idea of destiny, that you would matter because of it. Nathan looked away, unsettled in a way no alien ruin had ever managed before. That's a lot to put on someone who was just hoping for a quiet excavation. You won't get one, she said gently. A tremor rippled through the chamber. Not violent, but deliberate, like a system clearing its throat again. Syveth closed her eyes briefly, listening to something Nathan couldn't hear. The time is shorter than he believed, she said. The catastrophe is closer. Nathan straightened. Catastrophe as in the kind that doesn't explode, she said. It unravels. He stared at her. That's worse. I hate abstract disasters. She met his gaze steadily. That's why you're here. Nathan laughed, breathless and disbelieving, then shook his head. 600 years asleep, wake up, and immediately draft a confused archaeologist into saving reality. Syveth's expression softened. You were always part of the plan, he sighed. I really need to start reading the fine print on my career choices. Above them, ancient systems adjusted, awakening further, responding not to accident, but alignment. Nathan felt it then. Not destiny snapping shut, but something opening. A path, a collaboration. He looked at Syveth, at the immortal woman who had slept through the rise of his entire species and woken to him specifically. Okay, he said quietly. Let's assume I believe you. Her eyes brightened. Good. And let's assume your husband was right, he continued. What exactly are we trying to stop? Syveth smiled, and for the first time since waking, there was something like worry in it. That, she said, is the part he refused to tell me. Leaving the chamber turned out to be significantly more complicated than entering it, mostly because the ancient site now seemed personally invested in Syveth's continued survival and mildly suspicious of Nathan's intentions. The corridor beyond the chamber unfolded smoothly at her approach, panels sliding aside with quiet reverence. When Nathan followed, nothing moved. He walked face first into an unyielding wall of alien alloy and muttered something unfit for academic journals. Syveth stopped and glanced back. It doesn't recognize you yet. Story of my life, Nathan said, rubbing his nose. Do I need to bow? Or maybe apologize for the tripping? She regarded him thoughtfully, then placed her hand over his wrist, guiding it forward. The wall shimmered, hesitated, and then parted. Nathan froze. Okay, he said carefully. We are not going to talk about how that worked until I've had coffee. They stepped into a long passage lit by pale lines embedded in the floor, the light adjusting subtly to their pace. Nathan's helmet display struggled to keep up, tagging surfaces as material unknown so often that he turned the alerts off out of self-respect. So, he said, because silence was starting to feel heavier than the ruins. You slept through 600 years. Yes. Plagues, wars, the invention of instant noodles, the collapse of 3 major political systems. I missed noodles? She interrupted. Nathan looked at her. Okay, that's fair. They're not great, but they're comforting. She absorbed this with solemn gravity. Your species places great value on inefficient food. We contain multitudes. As they moved deeper, Nathan began to notice how carefully the corridors were designed, not just structurally, but symbolically. Patterns repeated in irregular cycles, never quite the same, like visual echoes. It felt less like a building and more like a thought process frozen into architecture. This place is thinking, Nathan murmured. It always was, Syveth replied. It learns by watching. That's reassuring, he said, in the way that being watched by your reflection is reassuring. They emerged into a wider chamber where the ceiling opened into a shaft stretching impossibly upward. Light filtered down from somewhere far above, refracted through crystalline structures that pulsed slowly, like a breathing organism. Platforms hovered in the air, shifting positions with lazy deliberation. Nathan stared. Please tell me we're not taking the floating death stairs. They won't let you fall, Syveth said. That's exactly what the last set of stairs said. One platform drifted closer, lowering itself as if bowing. Syveth stepped onto it without hesitation. It remained steady. Nathan hesitated, then followed, knees bent in a posture he'd once used when boarding boats as a child. The platform rose smoothly. See, she said. I see, Nathan replied, gripping the edge anyway. I also see a long list of people who trusted ancient technology and regretted it. As they ascended, Syveth studied the world beyond the shaft's opening, a sky cut by unfamiliar orbital traffic, distant lights tracing paths that would have been miracles in her time. So many humans, she said softly. We get around, Nathan said, mostly because we're terrible at staying put. She smiled faintly. He said that too. Nathan leaned back, exhaling. Does everything about me come with a footnote from your husband? Only the important things. That's worse. The platform settled onto a terrace overlooking the ruins, now partially uncovered by excavation drones frozen mid-task. Nathan waved at one out of reflex. It did not wave back. This was all sealed when I slept, Syveth said. Hidden to wait for you. For someone specific, Nathan corrected. You keep saying you, like I'm not interchangeable. You're not, she said simply. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. You know, from a statistical standpoint, this is absurd. Yes. And from a psychological standpoint, deeply uncomfortable. Yes. And yet, he added, glancing back at the impossible architecture behind them, here we are. They began walking along the terrace, ancient systems activating in gentle waves around Syveth, responding to her presence like an old house waking to a familiar resident. Nathan felt like an invited guest who wasn't entirely sure which rooms were off limits. What exactly was your husband afraid of? Nathan asked. Syveth's steps slowed. He didn't fear destruction, she said. He feared correction. Nathan frowned. Correction of what? Of reality, she replied. A collapse not caused by malice, but by good intentions layered too tightly together. That sounds like bureaucracy, Nathan said. Her eyes flicked to him. He would have liked you. I'm starting to suspect that's part of the problem. They reached a console at the edge of the terrace. Syveth activated it, and a projection bloomed into the air, patterns of light branching and folding, timelines overlapping like transparent threads. Nathan squinted. Okay, that's definitely not bureaucracy. That's worse. Your species has begun experimenting with temporal compression, she said. Not travel, not yet, but influence. Nathan's stomach sank. We're poking time with sticks. Yes, we do that with everything. She gestured to a cluster of collapsing threads. In most futures, it ends here. Nathan stared, then laughed weakly. You know, I was hoping this was going to be about stopping a bomb. Syveth glanced at him. You're disappointed? A little. Bombs have rules. The projection shifted again, stabilizing briefly around a narrow convergence point. This, she said, is where you change things. Nathan looked at the glowing nexus, then back at her. Still feels unfair that someone 6 centuries ago decided I was qualified? Syveth studied him, really studied him. He didn't choose you because you were qualified, she said. He chose you because you would argue with him. Nathan blinked. That's possibly the nicest insult I've ever received. The projection dimmed. Systems settled. Below them, the ruins hummed softly, ancient and patient. Nathan rubbed his hands together, forcing a smile. All right, he said. Immortal alien, broken timelines, universe on the brink. What's our next move? Syveth looked out at the unfamiliar stars, then back at him. We learn how your people broke the future, she said, and then we fix it, incorrectly. Nathan grinned despite himself. Finally, he said, a plan I'm good at. Nathan learned 2 important things very quickly once they left the ruins behind. First, ancient alien technology did not come with user manuals, warning labels, or a setting labeled, "Please don't erase reality." Second, introducing an immortal woman who had last seen the universe 600 years ago to modern civilization was going to be a logistical nightmare. The transport shuttle hovered at the edge of the excavation zone, its engines whining impatiently as if it resented being part of something historically significant. Nathan gestured for Syveth to step inside first. She paused at the threshold, studying the interior with polite suspicion. This vessel is very loud, she said. It's excited, Nathan replied. Or dying. Hard to tell with these models. She seated herself carefully, posture perfect, long ears flicking slightly as the engines adjusted pitch. Nathan watched her reaction to acceleration, prepared for panic, disorientation, or at least mild surprise. She showed none of it. Instead, she tilted her head. Your people have become very comfortable with falling. We call it progress, Nathan said, strapping himself in. Gravity is more of a suggestion now. As the shuttle lifted into the sky, Syveth gazed out at the expanding horizon. Cities glimmered in the distance, orbital traffic tracing glowing arcs above the planet like scars made of light. So many structures, she murmured. You build upward. Ran out of sideways, Nathan said. Also, we're bad at agreeing, so stacking was easier. She glanced at him. You joke when you're overwhelmed. Yes, he said. And when I'm comfortable, and when I'm terrified, it's not a precise system. The shuttle docked at a research station that had once been a military relay and now smelled faintly of recycled air and burned coffee. The doors slid open, revealing a handful of technicians frozen mid-motion, staring at Syveth as if reality had briefly misplaced its instructions. Nathan waved awkwardly. Hi, this is, a consultant. Syveth inclined her head regally. One technician whispered, her ears. Yes, Nathan said quickly. Medical condition, very rare. Please don't stare. They didn't stop staring. Inside the station, Syveth moved slowly, absorbing everything. Transparent displays, adaptive lighting, people conversing with artificial intelligences as casually as pets. She paused in front of a wall-sized data stream, symbols cascading too fast for human eyes. This is your memory, she said, externalized. Nathan shrugged. We forget things a lot. Writing them down helped. Her fingers hovered near the display but didn't touch it. My husband believed your kind would do this, she said. Build minds outside yourselves. That sounds flattering, Nathan said. He didn't also predict we'd argue with them online, did he? She looked at him, confused. Why would you argue with your tools? Nathan considered that. We argue with everything. They reached the station's archive chamber, where relics of abandoned research projects slept in quiet neglect. Nathan activated a central console, pulling up logs, simulations, and classified experiments that made his stomach tighten. Temporal compression, probability steering, causality dampening. Okay, he muttered. That's, worse than I thought. Syveth leaned beside him, studying the projections. These are attempts to soften the future, she said, to reduce uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty, Nathan admitted. It makes investors nervous. She looked at him sharply. You let fear of discomfort shape time itself? When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It is bad, Nathan sighed. Yeah, we're noticing. The simulations showed it clearly now. Small interventions piling atop one another, each well-intentioned, each designed to prevent disaster. Together, they formed rigid channels where probability could no longer flow naturally. Your future is becoming brittle, Syveth said. It can no longer bend, only break. Nathan rubbed his temples. So we overcorrected. Yes, that tracks, he said. We're very good at that. A new file surfaced, older than the rest, marked with restricted clearance and an annotation that made Nathan freeze. Syveth Protocol, Legacy Model. He looked at her slowly. Did your husband leave instructions here? She nodded once. He seeded them, quietly, across species, across centuries. Nathan laughed, sharp and incredulous. That's not a prophecy. That's project management. He hated inefficiency, she said. The protocol unfolded. Guidelines, not commands. Scenarios that required interpretation, disagreement, even failure. The system wasn't designed to enforce a future, but to invite collaboration at a specific point in time. At us, Nathan said softly. Yes. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. So the universe isn't doomed because of one mistake. No, Syveth said. It's threatened because too many people tried to be right. Nathan smiled faintly. That might be the most human problem imaginable. The station lights dimmed slightly as power shifted, the distant hum of machinery steady and indifferent. Nathan looked at Syveth, at the immortal woman who had trusted a future she would never see, then slept through it anyway. You know, he said, for someone who's been awake less than a day, you're handling this very well. She considered that. I prepared for 600 years. Show off! A small smile appeared, genuine this time. Outside, the stars burned quietly, unaware that they had nearly been organized out of existence. Nathan straightened, hands resting on the console. All right, he said. We know what's wrong. Syveth met his gaze. And now, he exhaled, humor creeping back into his voice like a reflex. Now we convince humanity to stop trying to fix the future. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds difficult. Nathan grinned. I told you, I specialize in impossible conversations. Convincing humanity to stop adjusting the future turned out to be less like a debate and more like trying to politely ask a wildfire to consider a different hobby. Nathan discovered this within the first 10 minutes of their emergency briefing, when 3 separate committee members interrupted him to ask whether the catastrophe could be monetized, patented, or at the very least rebranded as an opportunity. No, Nathan said, smiling tightly. It cannot be turned into a startup. Across the table, Syveth sat perfectly still, observing the proceedings with the same composure she might have used to watch a slow-moving avalanche. Her long ears twitched once when a senior analyst suggested running just a few more simulations to see if the timelines could be optimized. You see, Nathan muttered quietly to her, this is what I meant about us. She inclined her head. Your species mistakes repetition for understanding. The room hummed with overlapping voices, holographic projections blooming and collapsing as arguments collided. Probability curves twisted in the air like distressed ribbons. Nathan watched as the future was pulled, stretched, corrected again, every intervention tightening it further. Stop touching it, he said louder, losing patience. That's the problem. You keep touching it. A woman in a silver uniform frowned. With respect, Dr. Hale, that's how we prevent disasters. Syveth stood. The room fell silent, not because of authority, but because every instinct in the space had noticed her. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. In my time, she said, we once tried to remove sorrow from existence. We calculated every possible harm and redirected events to avoid them. A projection flickered behind her, responding to her presence without permission. For 50 years, she continued, nothing terrible happened. Several committee members smiled. Then, Syveth said, nothing important happened either. The smiles faded. Art stagnated. Curiosity dulled. Choice lost meaning. When the correction finally failed, it did not fail gently. Nathan leaned back, folding his arms. See? Ancient wisdom. Also terrifying. One analyst cleared his throat. Are you suggesting we abandon temporal regulation entirely? Syveth looked at him. No, I am suggesting you accept ignorance. The silence stretched. Nathan winced. Yeah, that's not our strong suit. The meeting ended without consensus, which was the closest thing to victory they were going to get. As they left, Syveth glanced at Nathan. They will not listen, she said. They will, he replied, just not until they're scared enough. That night, the universe obliged. The first rupture didn't announce itself with alarms or explosions. It appeared as a statistical anomaly in a shipping lane light years away. A ship arrived before it departed. No paradox alarms triggered. The system quietly corrected the record. Then it happened again. And again. By morning, causality had developed a stutter. Nathan stared at the data, eyes bloodshot. We're not losing time, he said. We're misplacing it. Syveth watched the patterns form, her expression tightening. The future is rejecting refinement, she said. It is folding back on itself. Like an immune response, Nathan murmured. Reality doesn't like being told what to do. A minor joke escaped him, thin and tired. Honestly, relatable. They worked without rest, moving between systems, archives, half-forgotten protocols left by Syveth's husband, like breadcrumbs scattered across centuries. Each one required interpretation, not obedience. Each one forced disagreement. This makes no sense, Nathan snapped at one point. Syveth nodded. Then it is correct. By the third day, small failures cascaded into visible disruptions. People reported déjà vu that lasted hours. Conversations repeated with different endings. A child on a station claimed to remember tomorrow and complained it was boring. Nathan slumped into a chair. We are officially underqualified for this. Syveth sat beside him. That was always true. He laughed weakly. I hate that your husband was right about everything. He wasn't, she said quietly. Nathan looked at her. What was he wrong about? She hesitated. He believed the future would forgive him. The room darkened as systems diverted power. Outside the viewport, stars shimmered, subtly wrong, their positions fractionally misaligned, like a smile held too long. Nathan stood. Okay, new plan. Syveth raised an eyebrow. You have another one? Barely, he said. We stopped trying to convince people. We stopped fighting the system directly. And do what instead? She asked. Nathan grinned, the kind of grin that meant something reckless was forming. We introduced chaos. Syveth studied him, then smiled slowly. He would have hated that. Perfect, Nathan said. Then we're finally doing something unexpected. Outside, causality trembled, uncertain. For the first time since she had woken, Syveth felt something like hope. Not because the future was known, but because it was no longer being strangled into obedience. She looked at Nathan, at the human who joked when the universe began to fray. Be careful, she said. He shrugged. I tripped into destiny once already. Worst case, I do it again. The stars flickered. Somewhere 6 centuries ago, a man who believed in probability had not accounted for humor. And that at last might save everything. Chaos, it turned out, required structure. Nathan learned this while standing in the center of a control room that no longer trusted its own readings, surrounded by experts who had finally stopped arguing and started panicking with impressive coordination. You can't just add randomness, someone shouted over the hum of strained systems. That's irresponsible. Nathan nodded earnestly. Yes, that's why I'm suggesting it. Syveth stood slightly apart, hands folded, watching probability graphs shudder and realign as if embarrassed to be seen behaving this way in public. She had expected resistance. What she hadn't expected was how quickly humans adapted once the illusion of control cracked. You built Safeguard, she said calmly, her voice cutting through the noise. Layers upon layers of predictive correction. Remove one, and the others compensate. Remove many, and the system collapses. A technician swallowed. So, we don't remove them? Nathan snapped his fingers. We confuse them. Silence followed, dense and uncertain. Think of it like this, Nathan continued, warming to the idea. You don't tell the system what future to want. You give it too many futures to prioritize. Syveth's eyes flicked to him. You're proposing narrative overload. Nathan smiled. I knew you'd like it. They began small, harmless disruptions, introduced noise into non-critical probability models, allowed minor outcomes to proceed uncorrected. A shipment arrived late and nothing exploded. A forecast failed and no one died. Reality inhaled. Outside the station, the stars steadied. Just a fraction. Look at that, Nathan said softly. It's relaxing. It's breathing, Syveth replied. The harder part came next. To truly destabilize the brittle future, they had to act where prediction was strongest, where Syveth's husband had anchored his most careful probabilities. Places designed to ensure outcomes. Nathan stared at the list. He really planned this thoroughly. Yes, Syveth said. He was very afraid of being wrong. Nathan glanced at her. And you? She considered. I was afraid of being alone. They traveled fast, moving through relay points and sealed archives seated centuries apart. Everywhere Syveth encountered echoes of her husband, devices that responded to her touch, messages encoded in obsolete mathematical dialects, quiet apologies disguised as equations. At one station, Nathan found a recording addressed only to her. He didn't listen. He just handed it over. Later, when she returned, her eyes were steady but distant. He believed love justified certainty, she said. Nathan nodded. People mess that up a lot. They reached the final node as causality trembled visibly. Not breaking, not yet, but stretching thin. Timelines overlapped like poorly shuffled cards. People reported memories that weren't theirs. A man claimed he remembered a version of himself who had chosen better shoes. Nathan cracked a smile. Honestly fair. The node was old. Older than most human settlements. built to anchor probability so firmly that divergence became almost impossible. Syveth placed her palm against it. The system woke instantly. "It recognizes me," she said. "Of course it does," Nathan muttered. "Everyone's got a favorite." The anchor began to activate, pulling futures inward, trying desperately to restore order. Syveth withdrew her hand. The system hesitated. Nathan stepped forward. "I don't think it's supposed to listen to me," he said. "Then say something it can't ignore," Syveth replied. Nathan leaned toward the interface, hands hovering, then placed them down with exaggerated confidence. "Hey," he said, "I'm not the person you expected." The system surged. "I'm not chosen," Nathan continued. "I'm not optimal. I'm not even sure I'm right." Probability lines spasmed. "But I'm here," he said, "and I'm going to make a mess." He did. Nathan rerouted prediction flows, introduced contradictory data, fed the anchor incompatible goals. Not destruction, confusion. Futures branched wildly, overlapping without hierarchy. The system wailed, lights flickering. Syveth watched, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something like pride. This wasn't rebellion against prophecy. This was editing it. The anchor finally released its grip. Across the galaxy, timelines loosened. Not fixed, not doomed, simply alive again. Nathan sagged back, breathless. "I really hope that worked." Syveth placed a hand on his shoulder. It did. The tremor subsided. System stabilized, not into certainty, but into possibility. Outside, the stars shifted. Not wrong this time, just different. Nathan laughed quietly. "You know, your husband would be furious." "Yes," Syveth said, "which means he would also be relieved." They stood together in the aftermath, the weight of centuries lifting, not erased, but transformed. "There's still one chapter left," Nathan said. Syveth met his gaze. "I know." The future, unanchored and unapologetic, waited. For the first time in 600 years, Syveth felt it watching her back. The universe did not end. Nathan considered this a personal success, even if it was a low bar to clear. The days following the release of the probability anchor were strangely quiet. No alarms, no screaming physicists, no reality folding in half like poorly packed laundry. Reports trickled in slowly, forecasts less accurate, simulations refusing to converge, prediction engines producing something dangerously unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Humans complained immediately. "This model only gives a range," one analyst said, aghast. Nathan smiled. "Welcome to life." Syveth watched it all from the observation deck, hands resting lightly on the rail, long ears catching the soft glow of stars that were finally behaving themselves. The galaxy felt looser, not safer, but truer. "They will try to fix it again," she said. Nathan joined her, holding 2 cups of something that claimed to be coffee. He handed one to her with ceremonial seriousness. "Of course they will. We're very committed to our mistakes." She accepted it, sniffed, and took a cautious sip. Her expression remained polite. "Your beverages are aggressively confident." That's the brand. Behind them, committees dissolved, emergency protocols were downgraded, and the Syveth protocol was quietly archived. Not erased, but annotated with a single line Nathan insisted on adding himself. Future outcomes may vary. The echoes of Syveth's husband faded gently rather than being torn out. His seeded systems powered down one by one, satisfied or perhaps simply tired. The recordings remained, but Syveth no longer felt watched by them. For the first time since waking, she felt unobserved. "Free." She turned to Nathan. "You argued with destiny," he shrugged. "I argue with instructions and furniture manuals. This was just louder." They stood in silence for a while, comfortable now. The crisis had forged something neither of them had been predicted to have: trust without obligation. "You know," Nathan said eventually, "when I first woke you up, I thought I'd ruined everything." Syveth smiled. "You did," he groaned. "I meant—" "And then," she continued, "you refused to accept that it was permanent." He relaxed. "Okay, I can live with that version." Below them, ships moved without pre-approved timelines, Pilots making decisions instead of following optimized routes. Inefficient. Beautiful. What will you do now? Nathan asked. Syveth considered the question carefully. 600 years ago, her future had been decided by love and fear, sealed inside a pod. Now it stretched open, undefined. I will stay awake, she said. I will learn what became of the worlds I left behind. I will make choices that inconvenience historians. Nathan laughed. You're going to fit right in. And you, she asked, what will you do when you are no longer necessary? He blinked. Wow, that's a lot. Humor, she added gently. You use it when questions are difficult. Yeah, he admitted. Guess I'll go back to digging up ruins, preferably ones without sleeping immortals. She raised an eyebrow. No promises. They shared a quiet smile. As preparations were made for Syveth's integration into a universe that had once been a prophecy and was now simply home, Nathan found himself different. He still joked, still doubted, but he no longer assumed he was small in the face of vast systems. He had argued with time, and time had listened. On the day they parted ways, Syveth paused at the shuttle ramp. My husband believed the future could be known, she said. I believe now that it can only be met. Nathan nodded. That's healthier. She hesitated, then added, he was wrong about one thing. Oh? Nathan asked. She smiled. He thought you would follow the prophecy reluctantly. Nathan grinned. I didn't follow it at all. Exactly. The shuttle lifted, carrying an immortal woman into a present she chose freely. Nathan watched until it vanished, then turned back to his work, to a universe no longer arranged in advance. Somewhere far from prediction engines and ancient ruins, the future unfolded, messy, uncertain, and gloriously alive. Nathan adjusted his recorder, cleared his throat, and began a new log. Day 1, he said. Nothing exploded, promising start.